Without much ado, today's topic is to discuss pedagogical approach to human habitat and architecture of empathy. In this presentation, there are two keywords that we will be mainly focusing on. One is on the human component of the habitat, and the other is the empathy. Now, what is humane? Now, it is characterized by the human qualities which are there within us, which is compassion, sympathy. And there is a very important quote by Mahatma Gandhi. He says that the quality of a civilization is known from how we treat our birds and animals. So probably this picture is a representation of how civilized our society is, if we are taking care of our birds and animals. There are a list of words which I have identified as the human virtues. And if we imbibe these virtues in us, if we keep ourselves constantly reminded about these virtues, then probably yes, we will become more empathetic in our life. So the question is, when do we empathize? So yes, we empathize in all these moments. The sound was not there probably, but we could hear everyone. So that is our empathy towards people. The architecture of empathy, how is it different? How can we recognize it? Are we able to identify an architecture which is empathetic than the one which is empathetic? For that, I have got one or two images to share. This is a sketch of a street which we come across regularly. This is the same street which is modified. So in these two sketches, it is very evident that yes, the one which is the second one is more empathetic. These sketches were developed by Jan Gehl. Jan Gehl has done a lot of research on urban areas. This is an example of a street in Britain where this was the existing street and he curtailed the traffic and it became so empathetic to people and a lot of people could gather there. This is how the change has come about. Now let us identify the resources of pedagogical studies. There are three distinct areas which this presentation will essentially talk about. First is do it and learn. Learn and do it. And the third is unlearn and do it. So in the presentation, we will cover all these three aspects first. When you do something hands-on, then that approach is do it and learn. So who will be able to do that? They are doing it. These people have done it, which we locally call it as Jugaad, the frugal initiatives of the people where they take whatever is from the neighborhood and build for themselves. There are towns in India which are like this. And there is a huge gamut of empathetic architecture which is around, which is built by the people using meager resources and showing the world this is the way to do it. This slide is a very common representation of most of the towns in India. If you check with your own homeland or your native place, definitely you might have come across a urban scape which is like this. Now, this is an audience question which I want to pose to the audience. I'm not going to answer this, but I want my audience to seek the answer for this. Why most towns in India look like this? Maybe after the presentation is over, we can have a discussion on this, but keep reminded about this question. The other approach is to learn and do it. If you choose to learn first and do later, probably this is just the tip of the iceberg of the number of books that we have to come across. Actually, in this presentation, I have introduced a few friends of mine. They will be joining us and we can interact with them. We can know from them their views. The first person I want to invite is Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs is the first, this sweet lady there in the photograph is Jane Jacobs. She wrote a book, Life in American Cities. It was a pioneering work. She just gives one advice: listen, linger, and be watchful about the city you are around in. She has a very good book. It was a pioneering work. Another guy whom we know is Christopher Alexander for his book Pattern Language. He has also written a book, Timeless Ways of Building, which shows us the way of how buildings can be made timeless. This is a little lesser discussed work. It is by Clark Marcus. she, along with her friend, Francis, had written a book on places. They have probably documented. Okay. This is William White. He's engaged studying a street. He has done a lot of study on urbanscapes. He has put up cameras on streets, studied the pattern of movement of people. He has come up with very inspiring books. That is the social life of small urban spaces. And there is also very detailed study on his work. He studied urbanscapes like this. These kind of urbanscapes are very common in our neighborhoods. We hardly notice, but there are very interesting details on the right side if you observe. Some people have put up pebbles on area, could have acted as benches, or some people will try to put up such kind of thorns so that making things difficult for people to occupy. But there is also a jugaad way. This person has put up a carton and tried to sit on that. We observe all this in our cities, take it for granted. So being sensitive to such observations is very important. So if you read this book by William White, probably it will give you an insight on which are the sensitive areas which we must be looking at. There is an article. Very little is written about him, very little is known about him. He is just like Rahul Mehrotra of India. We don't find much about him. There is one which is Survival Through Design, very interesting book. And his works are out of publication, very difficult to get. Whenever you get a chance, do read him. He talks about empathetic and human architecture. There is a special area that is crime prevention through housing design, which is also popularly called as crime prevention through environmental design. So if you come across any research material on that, I think architects planning to do work on human and empathetic architecture must have a look at it. This is Christopher Day is another of my favorite authors. He has written very good books on environment and architecture, sensitive. This particular book on environment and children is must read. He talks about how children use the environment. For a child, how the table height is different than for an fully grown. We don't find this data in ergonomics. So very beautiful write-up with sketches and examples of his projects are there in this book. Now we come to the biggest threat to environmental and human architecture is the modernist notions. There are two very strong notions of modernists. That is, architecture is masterly play of forms. This is very form-centric. Another one says architecture is machine. I think these two ideologies developed by modernist thinkers. Although this has come from one of my favorite architects, Corbusier himself. Many times quotes are misquoted. So this one is a misquoted example. But these modernist notions have kept us away from thinking about architecture. So we think architecture more as prolific and more as a machine. You know, you make a house and then you multiply it for a number of times until it will work well. So this is the unlearning and the relearning process that we have to take up. So where is empathy placed in our practice? One side is the designer, the other side is the user. So empathy occupies the space right there. It has to be there as an interface between designer and user. So what is the method that we can adopt? Very simple 2-3 steps that I want to do here. Just let us understand. Every architectural project is unique. It has a uniqueness of its own. So how do we judge that? We have to understand the needs of the stakeholder, identify whether the needs that he has specified, whether they are real needs or only an ambitious need, they are not realistic. So put a realistic check on that. And check a performance, whether what kind of a provision that you are making, whether it is going to really satisfy the need or not. We have to meet expectations. And later on, we have to also investigate what kind of an experience it has generated. This can be for a client, this can be for ourselves, this can be for our neighbors. So this kind of a study has to be very actively done. So how do we address that? There is a simple strategy which every design school advocates and asks the students to do. You should do a case study, you should build upon observations, come out with inferences and interpretations. I think this area is done more or less as a routine exercise. With involvement, this probably gives you the best clues on how empathetic your design could be. So how do we go about this? Step one, very patiently we have to observe. I think if I will ask you to observe carefully and silently to this picture alone, you will start seeing a lot of things. You will start seeing people, texture, how things are placed in the landscape, how that lady is occupying the place. She's exposing her to sunlight, so probably this has come from a cold climate. So these kind of observations we need to develop, and not to live, we have to record them. We should carry a sketchbook along and our travel diary, and we should keep recording things on it. And when we are working with people in projects where different areas are there, so then we have to ensure that this information is presented so that there is a stakeholder participation. They also know, okay, these are your observations, these are your analysis, yeah, whether they agree with it or not. And the last part is definitely documentation. We need to document all this. Even if there is a small project on a small site, there are a lot of parameters which are happening around it. So we need to think about them and document them. So there is one slide where I talk about this participatory process, how we can build it up. So there is urban form. When you have a site, you have to think about the urban form and its urban elements. These are the urban elements which probably you can list out. At the end, probably when the slide gets completed, you can take a snapshot of this. And we have to do a functional analysis of that space. Land use, pattern, what is the noise culture there, where are the sounds coming from, what are the pedestrian movements, vehicular traffic, what is the cultural view of the place, how is it accessible. And then we have to go a step further and we have to find about the experiential values. Legibility, legibility, sensory functions. Maybe these things may be slightly difficult to grasp at lower classes, but probably at the 4th year and final year level, you can easily grasp these terminologies. I have a slide later, which is much simplified version of what actually can be done. But there are two areas that I want you to explore. That is identification of the space. First, you understand what the design space is. And then we have to identify the need. What is the kind of provision that we want to make? If these two things are sorted, then you are 80% of your empathetic design is ready. There are a few examples of architects who are doing very good empathetical practice. One of them is Laurie Baker. Amazing work. And there is Hassan Fatih, which one should study. This is an example of the Gorner Village design. Individual houses were done. The simple interiors talk about more about the person who lives in that place rather than the architect himself. Alvar Aalto has my highest regards for his work on human architecture. Great fan of his. In fact, I wonder why he is not part of the architecture syllabus. He has covered projects, very entire spectrum of architecture design programs. Look at the interiors. Looking at his interiors itself, one comes to know about the quality of life inside this space. One particular project which comes to my mind is this sanatorium which he has done. He believed in use of bright colors, very sensitively designed space. And a very unique design which he did for that was, this was a place for recovery. So he put all the beds in one line, which you see here. All these beds are placed in one line and they are facing the landscape. Such a beautiful thought. It's an amazing idea. He's also credited to design of furniture. When Bauhaus designers were busy making steel as the voice of furniture, Alvar Aalto was in his works, he brought an interface. He introduced softer materials which were very sensitive to temperature. He uses the soft contours of the human body to gauge. So his architecture and interiors definitely is humane. His designs were never final. They were always sketchy. You will find him starting from scratch and then modifying the sketch multiple number of times and then finally arriving at a final design drawing. I think this is a very qualitative process. Now, when I have such a high regards for him, many people will question them why he is not discussed in architectural circles, why he is not as popular as Wright or Le Corbusier or Mies van der Rohe. Probably it has to do with the next slide. His architecture is blatant, calm, composed, and very, very down to earth. Looking at this facade, probably not so great about it. But let me tell you, if you observe this facade carefully over a period of time, you will find potential. At least the user of this particular building finds a great potential in creating an emotion. This particular creates an emotion, a bond with the user. And probably to develop this, we taste this. Staying in a city like metropolitan cities, We don't regularly get to taste such a kind of an architecture, but whenever we go to rural areas and we find this kind of a tactile quality or a textural quality to buildings, definitely we develop a taste to this. This is the last part of the presentation where I'm talking about 3 pillars. We can very clearly summarize on this. The first pillar is protect the people, provide them with comfort, and ensure that they are given a chance to celebrate. These are the pillars of empathetic design. Now, how? We have to protect them from traffic and accidents, protect them from crime and violence, climate and disturbance. We have to provide them comfort at these 6 fronts: walking, seeing, staying, when they are interacting, when they are sitting, when they are playing. We have to provide them with comfort. And the next step is to give them an opportunity to celebrate. Now, what are the things that they can celebrate, where architecture can contribute in, let them enjoy the scale, weather and seasons, quality and aesthetics. I want to plunge deeper into this discussion, so I will take each element separately now. We need to protect people from traffic and accidents. So we have to be particular about just start observation from today, how our traffic junctions are, crossings, signages, how they are. Make an observation on how the street lives and crime and violence is related. This crime prevention through environmental design book will be able to help you. So these are some of the areas where you can focus. Climate, we talk about built form and unbuilt. So it is this unbuilt where we have to know how is the wind coming, at what level, what height, what is the wind velocity, whether it needs to be curtailed down or the wind velocity has to be increased. What do we do about the dust? Whether we provide some shading, whether we provide some barriers, how do we handle pollution? Are we able to control glare? In most of the urban areas, we have glass facade buildings. They are causing huge glare to the facade onto the people on the street. We need to be sensitive to that. And also noise. So we have to know where the noise sources are coming from, how we can curtail them. Comfort. We have to give comfort for people. Vistas must be clear. Beautiful vistas of the cities have to be transparent. There has to be a focal point where the eyes can rest. There should be nature and texture which must come out. These are some clear story areas where you can view out. People should be comfortable to talk to each other. They don't have to yell at each other just to be heard. So we should have alcoves or intimacy spaces, talkscapes. Better is to explore possibility of creating talkscapes for people. Identify where we need to locate the sound barriers. We need to engage them into playing. Kinesthetic sculptures are doing wonderful job in urban areas. If you just Google this word, kinesthetics, you will find a lot of experimentation done. And generate activities. It is more or less how you put things in place and you catalyze activity. You have to provide them comfort while walking. How many times you walk along the street on a pedestrian walkway and see there is a lot of litter, obstacles. Sometimes the floor is very slippery. So these are the areas where we have to see that the comfort is there. Staying, when they are staying at a particular place, edges, niches, supports, shelter, shade, any tree or any shelter, wherever they are required, they must be provided. Or we should be sensitive at least. Yeah, this is missing. This can be done. So this is setting, again, covering those aspects. And last is celebrate. Scale of the place, width, making things litter free, weather, and they will be able to enjoy the variety of nature, birds and minor details which are there. Their tiling, flooring patterns, and all those becomes a lot of, they add a lot of quality and aesthetics to a place. So with these 3 pillars, which are discussed today, so I hope you are in a position to discuss empathetical design. So here there is an audience task. I hope you all are geared for this. Are we prepared? So I assume that everybody is prepared for this. I have a challenge here. This is a season where we are talking about a lot of challenges happening. So this is a design situation. Think about this. This is very common in our railing, and we have a pathway. What could be done with this railing here? What could be done with the parapet wall here? Whether all the street lights could house some library. So these are the challenges that I think of. And probably if you do this, you'll be doing a lot of good. And I can definitely say that whatever goes around comes back to us. So to do good to others, that good is finally going to come back to us. And with this short prayer, that may everybody be peaceful, I would like to end the session here. Let's make a beginning. Thank you.